New intro. So much love and appreciation to those of you who have been with me for the 2 year period plus that I've been doing this. Thank you for showing your love and support to the channel. And to anybody else who is brand new to the platform and you would like to support the channel, also, you can do it by way of Patreon, Anchor, the clothing store, and also the shoe shop that is listed in the comment description below. And again, thank you to any and all of you guys who have been here to support this channel during the 2+ year period. I wouldn't be able to do what I do every single day without you. All right, so before we get started, I'm going to read 3 different articles to you guys, and I'm just showing you guys the differences in information so that hopefully when reading these 3 articles, you can put together, in a sense, the full story for yourself and get a better understanding of what it is that I feel that I'm going to base my opinion on. An 18-year-old North Carolina man was fatally wounded by a Davidson County Sheriff's deputy in 2020. The family has filed a lawsuit against the sheriff's office and the deputy who wounded him. Civil rights attorney Benjamin Crump stated at recent news conference that a lawsuit has been filed on the behalf of Fred Cox's family. A medical examiner ruled that Cox's death was a homicide. However, his family announced that they will be filing a lawsuit after they were informed in June that Hill would not face any charges in their son's death. Guilford County District Attorney Avery Crump told the family in June that the grand jury opted not to bring charges against the deputy. The Davidson County Sheriff's Office stated in a statement about the grand jury, quote, "After a systematic and thorough investigation by the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigations, the Frederick Cox case was presented to the Guilford County District Attorney's Office as this 7-month-long process unfolded and has now come to a conclusion. We have learned that no probable cause was found to charge our deputy in the case of Mr. Cox." On November 8th, 2020, Cox was attending a funeral at Living Water Baptist Church in High Point, North Carolina, when people were leaving a funeral when individuals pulled up in a car and started shooting at the crowd. Family attorney Alan Rogers stated that in March that Cox was in his car when the shooting began and he got out to help bring people to safety, holding the door of the church open for a mother of her 12-year-old son to enter. BuzzFeed News reported that the family's legal filing. Cox had gone from his car to the other side of the building from the shooters back to the church and was holding the door for a mother and son when Hill began firing. Crump said that Cox was acting as a hero prior to his death, saying that he was shielding a 12-year-old boy when he was shot by Hill, who was in plain clothes. In a report released days after the shooting, the Bureau investigators stated that Hill had been asked to attend the funeral, which was being held for a man who had been recently killed. The victim's family asked Hill to attend in hopes that Hill would be able to identify witnesses of the shooting. Hill saw Cox with a handgun next to him, and the police state that Cox was gang affiliated. Cox was the only person who died during the violence that day. The family say that he was unarmed that day. The lawsuit claims 6 counts, including excessive force, wrongful death, battery, negligence, and violation of Cox's 4th and 14th Amendment. According to the lawsuit, Hill used, quote, "unreasonable and deadly force" on Cox while he was saving the lives of a mother and her young son. The family of a man who had his life taken by Davidson County Sheriff's Officer deputy in plain clothes spoke Monday after receiving the results of the victim's autopsy. Civil rights attorney Benjamin Crump, North Carolina activist Reverend Greg Drumright, and members of Fred Cox's family delivered statements about the autopsy report. 18-year-old Cox had his life taken on November 8, 2020 while attending a funeral at Living Water Baptist Church in High Point. Family members state that Cox tried to save lives by getting people inside of the church during a drive-by shooting at a funeral home. They want the deputy held accountable for Cox's death. High Point police stated that Cox had his life taken by a deputy after the shooting in the parking lot of the church. The deputy was there at the request of the family and to make contact with potential witnesses in the killing of Jonas Thompson Jr. that happened a couple of weeks prior. The SBI stated in January a preliminary investigation revealed a plainclothes Davidson County Sheriff's deputy opened fire after the drive-by and after coming into contact with Cox. The deputy stated that he observed Cox with a handgun at the time. The deputy then discharged his weapon, and other witnesses observed a handgun near Cox after he was shot. Crump, who has represented high-profile cases like the family of George Floyd, stated that this is a false narrative. Quote, Fred held the door to make sure others got out of harm's way, and he took bullets. Crump also stated that Cox was a hero who died ushering two people inside of a church away from the drive-by gunfire the police believed to be gang-related. During the initial investigation, an SBI spokesperson stated that they are awaiting an autopsy report before the case filed is submitted to the district attorney. Cox's family wants the name of the deputy to be released. The SBI stated that for deputy safety, they have no plans to do so. The family of Fred Cox, an 18-year-old black man who was fatally wounded by a sheriff's deputy at a funeral in North Carolina last November, filed a wrongful death lawsuit alleging that he was trying to protect a mother and her son from a drive-by shooting at the time. The federal lawsuit filed against the Davidson County Sheriff's Office and Deputy Michael Shane Hill seeks damages on 6 counts, including the use of excessive force, wrongful death, battery, and negligence, and the violation of Cox's 4th and 14th Amendment. The complaint states that Hill used, quote, unreasonably and deadly force on Cox while he was trying to save the lives of a mother and a young son. On November 8, 2020, Cox was at the Living Water Baptist Church in High Point attending the memorial services of Jonas Thompson Jr., who had recently been killed. Hill, a plainclothes sheriff's deputy investigating Thompson's murder, was also at the funeral at the request of the victim's family. A crowd was leaving the funeral service when shots rang out from a drive-by shooting outside of the church. Cox was sitting in his car in the parking lot on the other side of the building. During the ensuing chaos, he left his car to run into the church and held the door open for a mother and her 12-year-old child, who were searching for cover. While Cox held the door, Hill shot him multiple times from behind, killing him at the scene. He was the only person who died at that incident. The North Carolina State Bureau of Investigations, which investigated the shooting, initially stated that Hill had reported seeing Cox with a handgun at the time he shot him, and that other witnesses had observed the handgun near him when he was shot. However, Cox's family and their attorney have disputed that claim, stating that he was unarmed. A lawyer for the mother and the child, who took cover inside of the church, stated Wednesday that Cox could not have been holding a gun, as he was using one hand to open the church door and the other hand to usher them inside during the shooting. Crump stated that Hill continued to shoot at all 3 of them and that the 12-year-old boy's hand was grazed by a bullet. Quote, Fred Cox saved a mother and son's life before he fell, making sure they were safe inside of the church before he tried to enter. Authorities also stated that there was no evidence that Cox was in a gang or that he had discharged a weapon, but Hill will not face any criminal charges. So at the end of the day, we have a young black man, 18 years old, who was a father of 2, who had his life senselessly taken by a undercover plainclothes cop, who I guess wanted to or decided to mistake Cox as an individual who was trying to harm others, even though he had no evidence. They directly stated in quite a few of the articles that, the officer saw Cox with a gun directly to his side or directly on his person. So this is why the officer decided to pull his weapon and fire. Now, isn't it amazing how at the scene where this gunfire was taking place, that the cop did not initially fire back at the suspects that were performing the drive-by at that funeral, but yet the cop decided to fire directly at Cox. And I'm going to tell people my whole issue with this thing. Nobody's looking at the fact that you have a lot of undercover cops who are quote unquote in too deep and who are also working with other criminals, right? And or gangs. Because notice how they tried to say that, Cox was affiliated with a gang, that Cox had a weapon, but yet those things were disputed. Cox was there because a young man died, and he more than likely had information or knew or had potentially seen the person, right, who had took the life of that young man. That's why he was there, to help identify who it was if they were there. Then, because of, the family, I guess, wanting some type of police protection, possibly, maybe, you had an undercover cop that was there. But why is it that the shots rang out from the drive-by, and then after all of that took place, or during the time of that taking place, you have Cox helping a mother and her 12-year-old into a church, holding the door open, trying to make sure that they get in and they get to safety before he does, and the cop sees him as a threat, not the people driving by. So in my mind, I'm thinking that both this was a setup. right? So you have the drive-by taking place by unknown assailants because they didn't even identify, nor did they even make them out of the car, nor did they say how many people were in the car or who specifically did the shooting, right? They just said a drive-by was performed, right? So it could have been anybody. And then you have a drive-by being performed, basically making people move out of the way, right? Easing the path so that Cox can be identified and seen, right? And then you have the police, right, who was there in plain clothes, not as an actual officer so people can identify who it is, right? As a plainclothes cop, incognito. And then he proceeds not to fire at the drive-by, but after everybody is basically running, he decides that he's going to go directly for Cox because he can clearly see him. Pay attention. This is more than meets the eye. Transformers, white cops in disguise. That's clearly what this is. That's clearly what this is, and that's 100% what I feel. Because at no point in time would a cop, right, who was properly trained, is going to decide to shoot at a civilian, right, who is not harming anybody, versus trying to return fire to the people who are potentially going to injure 10, 50, or 100 people that, might have been directly at that funeral, right? Your job is to go after the assailants, not after somebody you think is an issue, you think is a shooter, you think is gang related. Like I said, it's a setup at the end of the day. And he was there to help do what needed to be done, which was to get Cox directly off of the chessboard so the real people, right, who committed the murder on the original young man could never be found and or brought to justice. Like I said before, this is another reason why the cop was never prosecuted. The cops are going to protect their own. If they know that they're after some type of case or all these other things, they're going to look over everything else that's transpiring up until they get the results that they want to get. But like I said, and I told people before, at the end of the day, this is just another way to erase black men off the board legally. But anyways, let me know what you guys think about this video and everything that's stated in the comment description below. And as always, peace, love, and stay tuned for the next video.